Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Mastercard Presents Living Room Conclave India Financial Series. We're discussing a very important topic today. We're talking about enabling MSMEs to realize their potential in a digital economy. Now, we all know that MSMEs are called the backbone of the Indian economy. They play a very important role in the country's economy, in the country's growth. Add to that the power of digital, the power of technology that has revolutionized not just India but the whole world in the last few decades. We've got a great mix here, and today I have a set of experts here with me who will be discussing what can be done, what more is happening to enable MSMEs so that they can grow in the digital economy. Allow me to introduce my panelists. We have with us Mr. Vikas Varma. He's the COO South Asia at Mastercard. We have Mr. Manish Bhatia, the president at Lendingkart, and Mr. Alok Mittal, the co-founder and CEO at Indifi Technologies. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me here today. I'll kickstart with you, Mr. Varma. Sir, again, at the start of the show, I did speak about how important MSMEs are, but could you help us kind of quantify it or give us some more information on the importance of MSMEs for the growth of the Indian economy?
Hi, Sumit. Thank you for having me on the show today. As you mentioned, MSMEs for India are the bedrock of our economy in multiple ways. And if I can share some very early stats with you, there are apparently over 60 million MSMEs, micro and small businesses across India. They're the second largest providers of employment after agriculture, and they contribute to 30% of our GDP. So as you can see, very essential, fundamental, foundational elements for the growth and the future of our economy.
Your interaction with them, your thoughts on how, do you see them leveraging the power of digital, and how do you see them growing in the digital economy?
I think as MSMEs worldwide and specifically in India fundamentally have three challenges. And the first is getting paid on time. And the second would be getting access to credit and capital. And the third would be to get access to markets and supply chains. Leveraging digital has been a very significant positive impact for MSMEs in India. And with the advent of the public digital infrastructure put in by the regulator and the government, we've seen really three broad things happen. One, with MSMEs going online, they start to establish an electronic trail of their transactions, which is helping lenders like the colleagues on the show, be able to assess them for credit and be able to lend to them basis their cash flows. I think the second piece is when they go digital, they dramatically improve their reach beyond their physical neighborhood, which was the challenge in the yesteryear. So you find a lot of MSMEs, finding online channels as a new way to grow. The third piece is really around operational efficiency. Digitization and technology has really brought about by itself automation, process improvement, improvement in customer service. So all of this allows the MSMEs to really focus on growing the business as opposed to a lot of the administrative tasks they would have done in the past in the absence of digitization. So very significant impact with technology and especially financial technology.
Great, very well put, Mr. Varma. Thank you for that. Mr. Mittal, I'll come to you. Same question, just your thoughts on MSMEs because you interact with them so much. How are they leveraging the power of digital? How are they playing an important role in India's digital economy?
I think the role of MSME in the Indian economy is fairly well chronicled. There are about 60 million units, as Vikas mentioned, and they contribute to 35% of our industrial production, 45% of exports. But in my mind, the central contribution of MSMEs has been to act as the backbone of employment in the country. There are more than 80 million people employed in this sector. And if India has to realize its goal of being a 10 trillion economy with equity, the job creation engine within MSME businesses has to keep firing. Even right now, we're adding about 1 million jobs per month in the MSME sector. So I think that's a very significant role that MSMEs have to play. We have seen MSMEs being quite innovative in how they use digitization and e-commerce, in their businesses. And really, from a core business standpoint, there are three problems that they are solving through this. First is adding new customers. So many of the MSMEs, even if they're offline businesses, retailers, traders, we have seen that they have started to now sell online through e-commerce platforms like a Flipkart or an Amazon, but also through cloud kitchens selling through food delivery platforms like a Zomato or a Swiggy, and hence be able to acquire new customers, grow their business through that channel. Equally so, because online channels can also represent a threat for offline businesses, we have seen MSMEs acquire more and more digital capability to retain their own customers. Within the payment space, we have seen a wide proliferation of new payment mechanisms, and small businesses are now accepting any payment mechanism that their customers would care to pay with. Similarly, they are beginning to use platforms like WhatsApp to market back to their existing customers, exposing their catalog, accepting orders through WhatsApp channels, and so on. The third area where we have seen a lot of innovation and resilience is MSMEs starting to sell goods that they erstwhile did not have in inventory. So they are now beginning to source e-commerce as a origination channel. If there's a grocery store, they are sourcing masks and selling masks to their existing customers. So increasing the product breadth is the third area we have seen some of this application going on. So those are some of the areas where MSMEs are innovating to grow their own business on the back of e-commerce channels.
Now moving on to Mr. Bhatia. So just wanting to get your thoughts on the, on how NBFCs are using technology to boost MSME loans. What's credit to MSMEs? What's your thought on that, sir?
Yeah, first of all, Sumit, thank you for inviting me to this panel. And a very, very relevant question. So overall, if you look at NBFCs, and how they're reaching out to, the segment, which is the MSMEs. So, you take any other equivalent, right? If you look at e-commerce, if you look at the Swiggies, the Ubers, the entire supply chain, which is, from a demand standpoint or discovery standpoint, how do you discover the product? Then it is, how do you make sure the experience of the customer and the business processes are great? Then it is, how do you match the demand with the supply? And at the very end, the last mile, right? Either it's refunds or actually picking out the package, or making sure that the customer service is great. Overall, the supply chain for financial industry is actually being built today, and that's where Lendingkart and I know a lot of other NBFCs are actually investing, so that when it comes to demand generation, how do we create the reach where MSMEs are able to not actually go from bank to bank and sort of submit their papers and understand whether they'll get a loan or not. How do they get to one platform where they can submit their queries and submit their application in? Second is the business processes, right? Looking at the customer experience plus the data, right? The alternate data, instead of, obviously bureau is important. What are the other alternate data we could use so that we can underwrite the customer in a much more, digital form? And be able to sort of give the MSME, a better credit. The third piece is obviously the supply side. How do we make sure that the customer who's coming into one platform is married with the right lenders, so that he doesn't have to go shop around 100 or 10 different places where he sort of gets dejected, or go from place to place. And the last piece, which is the last mile, right? How do you create a framework and a network of collections so that the lenders who are on the platform also feel feel better about the ability of data of how you will collect that the money if it's lent. So overall, what Lendingkart sort of looking at is the entire supply chain of financials, and how do we play in each one of these segments so that overall experience for the customer is better, experience for the lenders are better. And overall, everybody has a win-win situation.
Varma, I'll come to you next. Some of the challenges have been shared by Mr. Bhatia, Mr. Mittal, and by you also earlier in the discussion. But what are some other challenges that you feel that some of the key other challenges that MSMEs face to get integrated into the digital economy? And I'd also like your thoughts on the role of fintech in this, in helping in enabling MSMEs. Your thoughts, sir?
For a long while now, the MSME sector has had these fundamental challenges we just covered: operational efficiency, access to credit, access to market and customers. Fintech is dramatically changing a lot of that. And before that, I'd like to probably just sort of put on record the role of the government and the regulator in actually building out public digital infrastructure. Cheap data, millions of smartphones. We are now the second largest smartphone market in the world. Some 460 million new bank accounts opened and a lot of balance there. DBT of $80 billion was done in 2021, funding some of these hitherto excluded sections of society. So fundamentally we find that probably three areas. One is access. Fintech is really driving greater accessibility to financial services, to digitization, to these MSMEs. The other piece we find that a lot of fintechs are now focused on is on right fit technology and on assisted models. Given the nature of India's population, especially in the hinterland, lack of education, access, past experience in leveraging some of these technology tools, it's critical for users or for practitioners like us to really focus on technology that works. And very recently you might have heard of an offline payments pilot that the regulator had initiated, because not everybody in the hinterland uses data. While there's a very significant increase in adoption, there still is a very large gaps. And the second piece is on building out what I'd like to call phygital models, where customers in the last mile are really assisted with a combination of technology tools as well as human assistance to be able to carry out transactions on a digital basis. So a lot of this is actually happening now.
Great. Thank you for that, Mr. Varma. Mr. Bhatia, just coming to you, what are some, from your experience, some new innovations that you're seeing MSMEs use in your interaction with them, and especially maybe if you have some anecdotes, some examples of what's being used in different parts of the countries, because we generally talk a lot about what's happening in urban India, in the metro cities, but what's happening in the tier 2, tier 3 towns, that's where the next wave of growth is going to be coming from, and a lot of that digital economy's growth will be coming from there. So your thoughts on that, sir?
So, I think some of the points were already covered, but if you really look at, how the overall access to internet has grown, internet data has, about 700 million Indian consumers have access to data. If you look at the breakup of that, desktop has actually not grown, Wi-Fi has not grown. It's everything is related to mobile data. Now, and if you look at the maturity of all of the Indian customers, including MSMEs, right? They start with consuming content, then it's social media, then it sort of goes to a little bit of commerce, and then some they get sort of graduate into financial banking or taking loans and things like that. So that is where some of the assisted model that Mr. Varma actually spoke about actually is very, very prevalent. Now what we are actually seeing is, because of access to data, it's a level playing field now. And an entrepreneur in tier 3, tier 4 cities has the exact same access, if you will, when it comes to information and also taking loan. It's discovery is the problem. Access is there. Now, and the smarter ones who are, a little bit more educated are actually taking that leap, going online, applying, and overall, overall Lendingkart's been able to disperse loans to more than 4,100 cities now, and which we are able to see. And if you go talk to these entrepreneurs, right, I think they are bringing in a very genuine first principle, right, way of what is the problem they wanted to solve locally. What is what they're passionate about, and this is what their X factor is when it comes to actually building their products. So the innovation is, I think it's changed from, okay, let's copy what was successful somewhere else, to, first principle thinking about, oh, I have access to information, I have access to credit now. And the smarter ones are saying, okay, what is the real problem I'm trying to solve, and how does it align with what the entrepreneur's vision is?
Very important point shared by you, Mr. Bhatia. Well, gentlemen, we're running out of time, so I just have one last quick round of closing comments. I'll come to you, Mr. Mittal. So, just your thoughts as we close this. Just any suggestions, any thoughts that you have on how the entire ecosystem can come together? What more steps can be taken to help MSMEs grow this digital economy?
I think MSMEs are reflective of the vibrancy of Indian entrepreneurs. And for most of the problems that they face, there is entrepreneurial energy and there is solutioning that is happening, within the ecosystem. I think if there was one area where I would recommend policy support, it is in ensuring that wholesale capital flows to MSMEs at the right cost. MSMEs still have to borrow at a very high cost because the conventional channels of credit transmission have proved insufficient. So it is important that we figure out a solution to this and make sure that credit is flowing efficiently to MSMEs through the right intermediaries, rather than having to go through multiple levels, multiple banks and NBFC chains, which just takes up the cost of credit for MSMEs. Other than that, I am very, very optimistic about the level of innovation in the ecosystem targeted at MSMEs, both on the transactional side as well as on the software and enablement side.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mittal. Mr. Bhatia, same question to you. The way ahead, what do you see that can be done by the entire ecosystem to help, to enable, to empower MSMEs to grow this digital economy?
Yeah, very quickly. As we all are behind, making sure that India's GDP grows to, 5 trillion, 6 trillion, I think we'll also have to pay attention to per capita income. And what you'll also see is overall the women entrepreneurs and otherwise involvement in the workflows has actually reduced from 25-26% to 19-20%. And we are actually seeing a very similar trend in the MSME side of things. So I think what we'll really need, if we have to sort of grow as an economy per capita, if you have only one person working, how will the overall GDP and per capita actually go up? So I think we will need policy support for MSME women entrepreneurs. So that they get the help that is required for them to sort of grow and overall help India grow.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mr. Bhatia. Coming to you, Mr. Varma, for the last word, your thoughts, sir, the way ahead for the ecosystem, what can be done to help MSMEs grow in this digital economy?
A couple of thoughts come to mind. I think the first is that the Indian entrepreneur, given the challenges they faced all these years, have become very innovative. So, I think they can hold their own as they grow. But two things that would really help, and they're I think already in the offing, are fundamental changes in the way MSMEs can get access to credit. We've probably heard of OCEN, the Open Credit Enablement Network, where the cost of delivery of credit for small tickets and into the hinterland will dramatically change and become much more viable for MSMEs once this entire network is in place. And the second piece was around discovery online. Just 5% of India's total retail spending is today what we call e-retail. And movements like ONDC, the Open Commerce Enablement, which again will allow for a small retailer to get discovered across very large platforms, including the likes of a Flipkart and Amazon, without having to be a part of those platforms. And similarly, for people in the last mile to be able to look at choice from across a variety of sellers will all become a reality. I think both of these are going to be very large fillip providers for the MSME ecosystem.
Well, that's all the time that we have today on this episode of Mastercard Presents Living Room Conclave India Financial Series. Thank you so much, Mr. Varma. Thank you, Mr. Bhatia. And thank you, Mr. Mittal, for taking out time to talk to us about how enabling of MSMEs is happening with the growth of the digital economy. It's been an absolute pleasure interacting with you, and I'm sure the viewers are also taking back a lot from this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the viewers for watching us today.